evening. It's a pleasure to welcome you today, this evening, to a public lecture hosted as a part of the 34th media meeting of the Indian Academy of Sciences, Bangalore. The purpose of such a public lecture is to expose ourselves and educate ourselves of much broader issues that surround our society and where we can make a difference. And it's really nice to have with us today the speaker, Dr. Kavery Nambisan. Born in Palangala village, Kavery Nambisan is from the Kodagu district of Karnataka. She spent her early years in Madikeri. She graduated from St. John's Medical College, Bangalore, and did her higher surgical training in UK and obtained the fellowship of the Royal College of Surgeons from London. She has spent most of her career in rural India, in Bihar, UP, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. She has created several programs for child immunization and family planning for the rural communities. She is vocal in her critiques of urban centered health planning. She was a governing council member of the Association of Rural Surgeons of India. Kavery Nambisan is also a writer and has written in several novels, essays, and articles for the media on medical and literary matters. She was part of the international writing program in Iowa in 2007. She has contributed fiction to Indian literature, the journal published by the Sahitya Academy of India. She has authored many books with very many themes, from rebellious young medical student, the women's movement in independent India, to issues surrounding the lives of people in a small town. Her medical memoir, A Luxury Called Health, was published just last year. In 2005, Kavery Nambisan was a Kurk Person of the Year. In academy, we also strive to reach out to underprivileged places, different parts of India through our annual meetings like this. And it's really inspiring to have Kaveri with us today, who from her several decades of experience will explain to us how a rural career can be professionally enriching and can also provide a unique opportunity to engage with the many urgent needs of villagers that go beyond health into education and many other imaginative and enterprising pursuits. She has taken a less traveled path, which many of us will also find very inspiring and educating. It's Dr. Kaveri will talk to us about health, education, and communities, the future of a nation. Over to you.
Dear Dr. Wagmare, honored members of the faculty, students, and all the other scholars gathered here, I'm extremely delighted, happy to be at the Indian Institute of Science for the Indian Academy of Sciences and to be able to speak to you all after a whole day of your negotiating the intricate channels of science. You will get to hear something little more, relaxed. But having given you a mouthful of a title for my talk, I think I'll have to serve somewhat, at least an interesting platter for you to take away. And I thought I will tell you simply about what I know, which is about living and working in rural India. So, as you've already heard, I studied in St. John's, went to the UK for my post-graduation in surgery, and then came back. And my first job was in Bihar. And that was, it happened because I was to join St. John's Medical College at whatever level they put you when you come as a young surgeon. And just before I signed the appointment letter, I got another letter from a nun who had been doing medicine in St. John's when I was there. And she had written asking if I could go and join a hospital where she was working, where they were desperately in need of a surgeon. And so on a whim, we thought about it and we went. My husband was also a doctor, my first husband, and so we went to Bihar. So that is how my surgical career started in India. And we worked in Bihar in a place called Mokama, which is a railway junction about 90 kilometers from Patna. Mokama is a dacoit infested little place, little town, which has grown around that railway junction. It's also the place where Jim Corbett worked as a coal contractor. Well, my sister friend did not, um, you know, um, enlighten us about this dacoits or any such thing. So it was a complete surprise. And and from day one, there was another surgeon, a senior surgeon, thank goodness. And so, but we were to work alternate nights and alternate days, like we were two separate units to work. This is a about 180 bed hospital, and run by the Catholic mission, and very well run, beautifully, very well organized. But you had more or less stayed within the compound, hospital compound, where you had quarters as well. And so the number of cases that you got during the day were about 50 to 60 that you saw in the outpatients in the morning, and then a few more in the afternoons. But the main work happened in the nights because of the gunshot wounds. And it was not something that happens occasionally, it was at least 2 gunshot wounds every week. And so I got to do at least one. I think there were more because I did not keep the record of the initial years, but subsequently I kept a record of my cases when I was there a second time. And so I had kept a record, and in 18 months I had done 78 gunshot wounds. So that was the number of cases that you got. And they were all either AK-47s or country-made crude guns were used, and with multiple pellets. There were also stab injuries, and there was one bow and arrow injury. So you got all this, and the work was quite hectic. Of course, none of my FRCS training helped in any way to deal with these cases. And I found at times that I was like a person with two left hands. And but those were days when we had books and we studied books, and we had operating surgery journals and books which gave detailed notes. So I went back to my anatomy textbooks every night to read and to find out what happens in neck wounds, what happens, abdomen, everything. And so actually it was you had to learn on your own. Of course, we discussed with each other, myself and the other surgeon. So it was a very difficult but very rewarding experience. And you had, of course, the very, very poor. Bihar in those days was much poorer than it is now. And Bihar is still very much poorer as a state compared to any place in the south. I've just been there in January, and I saw the stark difference. I mean, it was so sort of stark, the difference between the south and what it is in Bihar. But people are very, I would say, warm and direct and extremely honest in their approach, which was rather interesting but also embarrassing, because they'll sometimes come to you, like you'll see them and they'll come to you after some time, and you're saying, okay, how are you now? They say, aapka dawai se kuch nahi hua. They'll tell you, straight to your face. So it was a good thing. And also you had things like, Bhai sab, what happened to your knee? They'll come with knee pain. What happened? You say, I was kicking somebody. That's how I injured my knee. So this type of thing. And the dacoits who we had to deal with, because they were the main criminals, and there were dacoit gangs which fought. There were two main gangs and many others. And there was the political nexus as well. So these gangs those criminals who came to the hospital with, like, if there was a wounded person they were bringing, then they would come, and they were all very respectful, very nice to you, and everything. And I had made it a point from the beginning, after I saw the way the crowds come in, that I will speak to the relatives only after the surgery is over, that I can only tell them serious, not serious, whatever it is, and say that leave us alone now, but no talking before this. And I'll talk to three people, not more than that, and the same three people each time, because otherwise, uncle, auntie, everybody will come to ask at different times. So that did help, but it was also quite intimidating to have a person sit in front of you. You can see the gun under his shawl sticking out. But somehow they did not harm us, or did not ever attempt to threaten in any way, nothing of the sort, except occasionally intimidation to change the medical report in their favor, you know. So so those things would happen in the initial days, and when once you made it clear that you didn't do that type of thing, they left you alone. And majority of them were abdominal wounds, the gunshots, for some reason, and they're always multiple. So there will be plenty of lacerated gut, which you have to, so that it takes hours and hours. And second was the thigh, I think, then neck, chest, everywhere. And you also got innocent people caught in between. That happened quite often. Pregnant women, children, you know, um, little urchins. I mean, all sorts of things. Sweet shop wala, there are so many dreadful cases. And so, but anyway, Bihar showed me what parts of India were like and how privileged we were, in being from a part of India where we are much, much better off. And our everything, the system, the medical training, everything was so much better. And even the junior doctors there were, not really well trained. It was difficult, but they were willing to learn. And the nurses were all tribal girls who had been trained by the nuns, and they were excellent. They were excellent. The operating theatre was superb. We could do all cases as best as you can do in most places. I mean, honestly, I was extremely fortunate to work with that type of infrastructure already there. And the nurses also, because they had their own nursing school, which is a very good nursing school. So the nurses were very good. So that was Bihar experience. I don't want to talk, too much about only this. So after that, the next place was in Uttar Pradesh, again in a mission hospital, but this time a Hindu mission hospital run by the Ramakrishna Mission. And that was a 250 bed place. Um, but fewer, I mean, not all 250 beds were in use, but less than that, because mainly it was the general wards that were full, and some of the special wards. But there, the thing was, when we joined, it was very frustrating because they did not have good nursing staff, they did not have good doctor infrastructure, and the Swamijis did not really understand medical anything. The nuns were very smart. They had, in every department, they had trained their own people. So they were, they were competent, and they stayed, they worked. They were very good. So here it was completely different. And I remember once walking into the Swamiji's office and saying, "Why did you ask me to join here when there are no nurses? And I'm so, I have trained, I'm a trained surgeon, and, what is this? How do you expect me?" I was ranting, and he said, "Doctor, he was a Bengali. So he said, "Doctor, you want to improve things? You help us. Why don't you stay and help instead of just," he was trying to tell me that instead of complaining, do something, help us. I mean, actually, he was right, and I got a start, but then I said okay, and we decided to stay on, and finally, and he was so like actually wanting to run a good hospital, just didn't know how. And so we could help, and the doctors got together. We were 6 doctors. So we got together and we decided how we could improve things, how to train the nurses, how to do, various things, how to improve different parts of the hospital. And we finally started our own nursing school there. We started a proper government recognized nursing school of just initially 10 students, then 15 students per year. That's all. But we did. And that helped a lot because we had very good people, because we trained them, we took lectures for them, we did everything for them. And Brindavan, we stayed for 6 years. I was there for 6 years. And the surgical, the variety was astounding because there was so much of, the in the 80s, the extreme poverty in these places and the lack of good medical care, medicines, the lack of access to hospitals. So people came from faraway villages on wooden, homemade stretchers or carrying their patients, everything. They crossed the Yamuna by boat, all this used to happen. And so they came to you in real crisis. So it was always difficult, very, very serious cases and of all types. I think over there I saw tuberculosis of every part of the body you can imagine, like bone and brain and even breast and eye and everything. So so we got so we got so much experience. I got so much experience there too. You have to read a lot, but by then that we doctors decided that we would start having regular clinical meetings, between us. So we would each week, once a week, we would one of the doctors would present a challenging case, something interesting that he or she had seen, and talk about the case, of that particular topic. So we all learnt from each other that way. It was very, very interesting, and I continued doing that after that because it really helps to have a meeting where you meet your friends and talk, even if it is a small group. So, and Brindavan also had its, you know, mm, it's a religious hub, and Mathura is 14 kilometers. Brindavan is, has got plenty of the most beautiful temples. So a lot of tourists come. And also they have the Bengali widows who are, it was considered at a time that in parts of Bengal that a widowed woman goes to Brindavan, should be taken to Brindavan, so she's nearer to Lord Krishna and she will die there. You see, so they were taken there, and lots of them just took them and left them there. In dharamshalas, and those dharamshalas were just long corridors of grim squalor. So these women, there were hundreds of them all over Brindavan. They all got 2 off-white saris a year, and they did this bhajans in the temples, and for which they got 2 meals a day and 2 saris a year or something like that. And they were not only poor and destitute, their health, you can imagine, was just unbelievable. You couldn't say that they were, like, most of them were in their 50s, 40s, 50s, or even younger widows, and they would be so starved and nutritionally deficient, and everybody had osteoporosis, and they were all bent over, and they often broke their bones. So we had, actually, the hospital gave them free treatment. They didn't charge them at all. The hospital itself was very, very economical. It was not expensive. But there was a whole big ward for them, because they came all the time and you had to treat them. So, so in Brindavan, we saw a variety of surgical cases. I mean, amazing variety, which I have not since seen that much. I haven't since done that much of variety of cases. And as I said, reading is such an important thing for young people at that of my era, because we had to rely on books, journals, and medical journals. There were journals from US, UK, and Canada, which they would just send you cyclostyled papers, the whole thing in cyclostyled pages. Like once in 2 months or something, you'd get a whole lot. And for whatever reason, they didn't charge us anything to send these. They just sent. When you told them we're working in such a place, please send, they just send you. So that was amazing because that was very, very good, real, the current um, evolving progress in medicine, the techniques, the things that happen, everything was there. So it was a wonderful thing which we managed to get for many, many years. So that was in Brindavan. And those were the two areas of North India where I worked and where I saw the stark difference between the North and the South. After that, we came south, partly because, families are also a bit upset about your being in difficult areas all the time, and there were various other things. Our daughter was, growing, and we had to put her in a hostel. So we came south. South India was very different, the work. Part of it I worked in Coog in a rural India health project, which is a community run hospital, which was initiated by the community itself, and funds collected from everywhere, and with their own trustees, and that was very good. But later it was taken over, the administration was taken over by the Tatas. When Tatas bought a large plantation in Kur, they took over the administration of the place. And so we had Tatas, and finally, when I I did mention that I was in Lonavala. In between, we had been in Lonavala, and when we came back, I was the chief medical officer in that hospital. So the learning for me in South India was, one, working in the Tata plantation hospitals. I had to oversee all the hospitals in Tamil Nadu and Hassan, Chikmagalur, and Coog. Coog, where I worked. So I had to visit these places also. But what I learned here was administration, which I never knew, and so surgeon has nothing to do with administration. So I always thought of it as some boring thing. You go to them when you want leave or you want your salary or something. So, so I had to also do, handle administration. I must say it helped me a lot to understand the working of a hospital, the dynamics, how money is spent, how you, um, you know, do the best with it. Tata's taught me how a corporate sector can actually provide very good health care, if they want to. And so Tata's was very good with their healthcare. I was quite impressed with what they did for their workers. It was very good. And because in Bihar and UP you had a lot of problems because patients anyway don't have money, but they couldn't even pay the little that the hospitals asked. The hospitals really charged a pittance, but that was also difficult for them. But it was easier in Tata's. Of course, the Tata employees did not have to pay, but the others also, they paid, but it was not that much. And administration taught me about purchase of equipment, how to maintain the maintenance contracts, the various things that you have to do as the administrator also. And one thing I realized also is that even though Tata's was doing the administration, and they had said that if the hospital runs at a loss, then we will make up that loss for you. Something like that, up to 10 lakhs, I think, or something like that was there. Then I thought of it and I looked at the whole thing and I found that was not a very wise trend to go into, because the minute you're relying on somebody to look after your hospital, then you don't have to work. Your commitment to work will suffer. Because you take it for granted, no matter what, they are going to look after us. So we decided that we have to earn that money, to run the hospital. We should have enough funds to run the hospital, we had about 50 odd staff, everyone included, the nurses, ayahs, doctors were 5 or 6 at a time. And we had to, but the senior doctors, at least I think two senior doctors, the salary was paid by Tatas. The rest was all to be looked after by the hospital. And it works when you, once you make up your mind that the hospital is going to be efficient, it's going to work, and it is going to not, and it's going to stand on its own feet, self-sufficient, then you tend to work better, your morale is better because you're earning, yourself. So I must say it worked very well, and we were able to do it. We never had to take money from Tatas, during those years. We never did. Although some people differ from me and they say, why can't you take? But I say that take the money from corporates for the infrastructure, for the buildings. That is okay, because you can't build, you don't have the money to put up buildings, you can't do all those things. We won't earn that much money. So take for those things, but don't take to meet your day-to-day expenses and salaries. So, so that was in Kur. And the work in rural areas as such um, taught me a lot of things. First of all, you get more, you're kept more in touch with the community. You meet people all the time. You meet the school teachers. You meet meet everybody. Your cyber cafe person, this one, that one, everyone, contractors, acharyas, everybody. You keep meeting as patients as well. And because you're a doctor, somebody invites you for the school, some ceremony, some function, you know, and you go to a school, then you get to know those people. So that way I got involved in the education system a little bit. And in Bihar I didn't, but in Uttar Pradesh we started a library for the children. And we first ran it from home, which became very difficult with a lot of boisterous kids coming all the time. So we were running it from the house of a boy who went to college, to Mathura College. He used to go from Vrindavan. So in his house, he agreed to keep the books, and the children would go and get the books. And that developed so well. I mean, we had only 70 odd children in the thing, but there was so much excitement about getting books other than their school books. Don't forget, those were days when they didn't have television. We didn't have television. So it was, reading was one of the pleasures. So they started reading a lot. Then we used to have monthly competitions with painting and elocution, various things we would do, and even held a show. The children put up a show with plays and all these things. So that way we got involved in Coop too. The same way we did various things, and in Tamil Nadu. But I also found, and the other thing we got very involved in is waste management, because as a hospital you have to manage medical waste, so you have to learn how to do that, and segregation, all the things involved. So we came to know, and then when we subsequently moved elsewhere too, when I've now been in a village, so you can help people by advising them and hoping and trying to put pressure on the panchayats to do these things, so you can engage with people. As a doctor, you do have that chance, that commitment. There is also the other very human side of it, which is that people come to you with all their sorrows and they want to tell you, they want to talk to you about their problems, and you have to make the time to listen to them. That is again something you have to learn if you're in a rural area. And the confidentiality that is involved, that you will not, spread it around, talk to anybody else. These are certain lessons that you learn, and you get the chance to do it. And also because you're a smaller group of people and it's like a family, so you can develop certain things. For instance, you can ensure, for instance, I feel that malpractice happens, but if you can stem it at the beginning, you can avoid. And you have to set examples for these things and be stern about any form of malpractice, whether it is the ambulance driver or a IR or a nurse or a doctor. And and once you do that, then things become all right. People realize that so and so will not take this type of thing. So I do think institutions, the ethics of an institution matters in a way as much as that of an individual, right? Because the individual can be shaped by the institution at times. And this I've found over and over again when I have worked briefly in cities and in places where, things were really bad. So I do know, and I can tell you that I was not very popular because of it, naturally, and I had to face the consequences of that. But that is a different thing. And the what did I get out of rural work other than having worked there and the joy of it and all the rest of it? I I think it brings me to the thing of what is all science about, since you're all scientists. And science is, just now we were talking about is, science is nothing without the humanities. Because you need the human factor. You are scientists because you have a humanitarian view of things somewhere in you. And that is what makes you lean towards going towards something where there is perfection, where there is progress in a real, in a true way. It is not conjured, it is not made up. And so I think about the cell and the body, the cell. The cell is a single unit of a living organism. In living organisms, it's got its cytoplasm, nucleus, Golgi bodies, mitochondria. It has the cell wall. Although it has the cell wall, it is semi-permeable. It can, nutrients and fluids can pass in and out. And a group of similar cells make up an organ which has a certain function, and a group of organs which are working towards the same function become a system, like a vascular system, digestive system, nervous system, so on, skeletal. So, so that is how the body is formed. So each system has its distinct functions, and it has to do it. And those systems have to work in tandem with each other. They cannot work in isolation. Suddenly one system cannot go on strike and say, today I'm not, kidney can't say, today I'm not producing urine, I'm not working. We can't have that. So the body is designed for that mutual adjustment, mutual coexistence of different types of cells, different systems being together to make the body healthy. The minute there is malfunction, then we get disease. And as for the cell has a certain structure. But when the structure changes, when the cell structure itself misbehaves or the morphology changes, then you can get cancer when the cell goes atypical and multiplies anyway. And then it begins to attack the normal cells too. So I thought of that. I thought of the computer in comparison, how the computer has got the hardware, the software, the person who's using it, the, the online material, everything, how the whole thing has to coordinate to make sense. Water in a well. The water in a well will go down and it will come above. The groundwater will keep feeding it. As you draw water from the well, it will still come and find its level. These are all things of adjustment. Our skin temperature, even the hottest of days and nights, our body temperature will stay within a certain range. It will not go beyond that, or we will die if it does. And so we have this, what we call milieu interior of Claude Bernard, where it is about how we live in harmony with the outside world as well as harmony within ourselves. So harmony within the person and harmony with the outside world. So I think, and then I was thinking about the interstitial spaces in the body, the interstitial in between spaces within the body is what the interstitial spaces are very important. You can't really be without the interstitial spaces. They too have their function. So now I think of humanities as a sort of something that fills up those interstitial spaces as something that is very necessary, and yet you don't see it. You don't know how to define it very well. You start having to talk a lot before you come to the point of what is humanities. But we understand when a person is humane. We understand what it is to be humanitarian. you see. So I think for me, working in a place which gave me a lot of time for also for reflection and reasons for reflection, because as I began to learn, especially as a young surgeon, I made lots of mistakes. I had lots of failures. I know that as non-doctors, you'll feel alarmed for a doctor to say I made a lot of mistakes. But what I mean is that is under the umbrella of a senior person who protects you and guides you. And you in turn do that to your juniors when you're training them. And we go on. But what happens is from our failures, we learn a lot more than we do from our success. That is true of all of life. We learn a lot from our failures, and one has to, that is only when you confront your failures honestly. That is the thing I think I learned through my professional journey through all this. And about this humanities, which again we have a humanities department in St. John's now, um, we had to talk to the administrators for a long, long time, for many years before they would accept something like this. They said, students are already up to here with their medical curriculum. How can we put another thing like this where you want to talk of art and literature and all that? Anyway, finally, they did give us a space and, you know, a person to run it and everything. And that's going on. And it's been very rewarding. The numbers are not huge. It's not that all medical students come running to the humanities department. They don't. But there are quite a few and who have benefited a lot from this, and who come even to people like me and say, how did you do this, what you have done? And we also want to. Right now, there are two doctors from my medical college who graduated last year who are in Mokama, working there. They say, we read your book and we heard or read all about it and now we want to go and work. They're doing very well. They are doing well. I met them when I went in January. And so the what I learned is that the best way for whether it is coming to the present context of how do we live our lives, how do we we are all professionals, we are professionals. So we have a task, we have a responsibility towards our profession. That is the first thing. But we also have a responsibility as professionals who are advantaged because not everybody can even have a profession. For various reasons, they cannot hope to have a profession, especially one that is interesting and one we are in love with, we are passionate about. Now, that is, I think, the great blessing about something like science. You know, it's a great blessing, because you just think of somebody going and working somewhere where there is no joy in the job. It's devastating. So that is a great thing. And what can we do in our with the other part of ourselves that is there? We've got much more resources than what we put into our professions that we can utilize. And how do we utilize that? And my feeling is that the reflection that we can do, like at least at some time of the day, every day, to think of how is my day gone, or where is my life leading me, what is the purpose of this. There is a purpose obviously in this profession, but there is something else too. How about the family? What have I done for the family? Meaning, how much time do I spend with the family? These are all important matters for professionals, because we spend long hours at work, but we cannot ignore our families. We cannot ignore what is happening around us. And as you know, in India right now, I think 10% or less is organized sector, to which we belong. 90% are working in the unorganized sector. And unorganized sector means there is no record of of their difficulties or their other, whatever. It is extremely difficult. And now we haven't had census for a long time. We do not know a lot of things. But what I mean is that we are in a privileged place. And my way of addressing this is to do small things. I'm not saying that one can do, we can all go and do what somebody like Tata's does, or, various people, Azim Premji has done, various other people who have done wonderful work, and we can do little things. And these little things are what take us forward in a different way and make us better at our own professions. And I found that for me, like I took to writing, and writing helped me to become a better doctor. There is no doubt about that. It is true that medicine helped me to write a lot of books and influenced a lot of my writing. But reading, because I read a lot, if you're a writer, you have to read a lot. And I've always read a lot. And that helped me to develop, to see myself through the eyes of other people and to go into the minds of other people. As a writer, you create characters and you have to go and enter their minds. So through these things, we realize that the interstitial spaces are not just there vacant and not to be looked at. They are there, they are pulsating. And in our own society, that is what I would probably, we could call it civil society. What civil society means, I don't know. I think it means any society that wants civility, nothing else. That's what it means. But they're serious about it. So the my my one thing that I could tell you is that by working in a village, I got more. I got more out of it than I was able to give. There is no doubt about that, because there is so much waiting there. There are so many rewards that you get living in a place like that. There are, of course, things opposite to that, but on the whole, it has been a very rewarding experience, and it has taught me that not only as a doctor, but as a human being, wherever you are, it's by doing little things that you make changes, not some big thing. So little things matter. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. Shall I sit down?
I just wanted to ask you one simple question. So you mentioned that you were working in a village where dacoits and all were around, but still they respected you and didn't put any harm in your way. But in a city like ours, we still have doctors have been murdered, killed by people. So, so where do we stand with respect to
Yes.
gun violence?
It
Could you
is.
have thoughts on that?
Yes, I
Yes.
think society is a very complex thing. There is a lot going on which we do not understand, when we do not know. But I have seen that when there is a death, we all have faced this type of wrath of patience. Particularly in cities, this wrath is so much. And I think when a patient loses a loved one, the first thing they do is they have to have a reason. you know my father died of a heart attack. I took him there, but they didn't see him early enough. He should have been seen early. There was a wait. We will find a reason, or there will be something. So the tendency in the beginning is to feel guilty. When you lose a father, a mother, a husband, whoever, you have a sense of guilt. What did I do wrong? How did I lose him? What did I do? Or how did I lose my child? Whatever. So that guilt you're trying to transfer without knowing. So the wrath of the patients that comes, the fury and the way they start breaking things is nothing but a transference, I think. Because ultimately, if you can get them into a room, if one or two will come and talk, and you calm them and say, look, we did all these things. And if you find that what we did is not okay, you go ahead and put a complaint. Do what you want, but do not destroy, do not harm people. If you talk to them coolly, the chances are that things can cool. Not always. I have seen in St. John's a child in the ICU passing away, and the huge ruckus that took place, and the police. I mean, of course, now they have everything instant. The police will be there in no time, and they will come and they'll try to stabilize everything. But it is extremely unfortunate what has happened. Although I was trying to summarize everything. I didn't say all that happened in Mokama, but there were certain attacks did take place. Some not in the hospital, but outside the hospital. A few nurses were molested, and one priest. There was a mission, a Jesuit mission running a school just next door. And that priest, who was always in the hospital too, very senior man, he was in his 80s, and the hospital generator had been stolen. not the hospital, the Jesuits, their seminary, their generator had been stolen, and he knew who had taken it, this priest. So he called them, he confronted them and said, please just return the generator and I will not put a complaint, I will not put a case. We will not do anything. But instead they came and they gunned him down, Yeah, they gunned him, and his life could not be saved. He was just finished. But those do happen. They are rare.
You, if you want. Very-
Thanks really for this wonderful narration. You made already a statement, but I thought if you could comment a bit more, because one of the things I saw when I knew your name and I looked at the books, I was simply impressed with the number of books you have written, in fact. And you made a very important statement that your surgical work fed into the books, and the books in turn are actually fed back into your surgical work. So I wanted to understand this connect, because these are, in some sense, though the books are about health, and sometimes it still is a very complex connection. So I
Yes,
thought if
yes.
you could say a bit more
Yes.
about that.
My books, like the books I have written, are all fiction except the last one. They are novels. So they're purely stories. And a few of them are medical. Two of them are medical. One is about a medical student who runs away from medical college because of something he's done wrong, and travels through India and does all sorts of things. And the other is about, it's a little bit of biographical, you can say, because it's a woman who becomes a surgeon. But she's from a village and something of that sort. But I really used the surgical parts in it. The personal I made fiction. And but as I said, the surgical life, our medical life, wherever you're working, gives us a lot of you know insight into characters and stories. That. So when, yeah, the other which I never expected, I did not expect. And actually, I was at one such conference somewhere where a lady asked me this question. The question was, we know that you have derived ideas and things from your medical life, but how about literature having influenced your medical? She asked me this, and I was stumped. I didn't have an answer. I did not have an answer. I told her I'll have to think about it because I don't know. And then I thought about it, not immediately, but over the years I thought. And I realized that it is because it certainly developed my sensitivity. It made me also more cohesive. Because when we write, particularly fiction, my way of writing is to first create characters and give them a area place, or somewhere, because you create a character, then they're living in some place. So a 74-year-old widower living in Madras by himself. Then I create the what happens, how will his life be, what will it be like. So I start imagining, I create the whole thing, and then I go in, that a story comes out of that. But and when we have to do this, it is very important for us to stay with characters, not put our thoughts into their minds. So you're creating, so have to think like a 74-year-old widower. How was his family, how was his wedded life, was he happy, was he not, what are his thoughts, who are his children, where are they, why is he not staying with them? So you start developing characters, and reading, because I read everything. I love reading all types of books, comic books, plays, thrillers, detective fiction. But I like a lot of good classic literary fiction, is what I really love. I like the Russian writers a lot, and some of the older English writers. A lot of Indian writers like Muhammad Bashir and Vasdev Nair and various others, Premchand, everybody. I read a lot of old literature. I like it. And I feel I've learned a lot because good writing delves into the lives of other people. So we sit here, we know each other as friends, colleagues, but we're not really understanding what goes on in the head. But a writer gets that license to go into their thoughts, because you have to go into their thoughts. So you have to do that. And you can't use your thought. So as you're doing these things, you realize how people think. You see, maybe there is a burglar, maybe there's a murderer. You have to realize, I mean, so that is how I think it helps you to develop. You become then more understanding of people who don't think like you. See, what happens is we are very comfortable with people who think like us. Or well man, say if I'm with people who are all well behaved like all of you, or I'm a very nice person, but you put me in place where somebody is all the time doing something, and I probably react, and be as nasty or whatever. I don't know. So it's easy to be good with good people, but how do we maintain anything of that sort when we are confronted with something else, which to us seems, you know, something not okay? You know what I mean? So those are the things I learned.